All right, it is 4:05. Welcome, everyone. I'm so happy to see so many people here making time for our event today. I feel like I know so many of you, but I will introduce nonetheless. My name is Regine Jackson. I serve as the president of the Haitian Studies Association for 2026. And again, very, very happy that so many of you have taken time out of your day, no matter where you're joining us from, to participate in our event today. What we'd like to do today is to provide a really important update on Haitian immigration in the United States. And there are a number of really talented and knowledgeable panelists who will address the volatile and shifting immigration landscape for Haitians, touching on TPS case and the Congressional TPS advocacy that exists. And this conversation, this timely conversation, is for everyone. We hope to share what we know, but also to help clarify any misconceptions about current immigration policy and procedures in our time together today. So, first, I want to thank Dr. Darlène Dubuisson for organizing this event. Darlène is assistant professor of Caribbean Studies at the University of California, Berkeley. She is the author of the award-winning Reclaiming Haiti's Futures, Returned Intellectuals, Placemaking, and Radical Imagination. This is a recent book published by Rutgers University Press in 2024. Darlene is also co-author of Legalized Inequalities, Immigration and Race in the Low-Wage Workplace, which was recently published in 2025. Beyond her scholarship, Dr. Dubuisson is an immigrant rights advocate and has served as an expert witness for Haitian asylum cases in the United States and Canada. And on top of all that, she finds time to serve on the HSA board while raising two beautiful, beautiful boys. Next, I want to thank Dr. Irene Brisson. Irene is professor of practice at the University of Detroit Mercy in the School of Architecture and Community Planning. Irene is a scholar of the built environment and global architectural history. Their research, teaching, and practice center historically marginalized building cultures and designers in Haiti. And Irene is also the co-director of the Caribbean Spatial Justice Lab, which works to support a network of transdisciplinary and transnational design researchers committed to addressing inequality and climate vulnerability in the Caribbean and its diaspora. Finally, before we start, I want to thank Mr. Julio Perez Centeno, who does so much, and I mean so much, invisible labor and behind the scenes work to make all of our HSA events possible. So finally, thank you to you for joining us today. Again, for our important conversation, I want to turn it over to Darlene, who's going to get us started, introduce our panelists. But welcome, bonsoir, merci un peu.
Hi, everyone. I am calling from Mexico City. It's great to be here with you in space and to see all of your faces and your names. I'm going to get some logistics out of the way and then we'll jump into introducing our amazing panelists. So there is Creole interpretation available. At the bottom of your screen, you should have an interpretation button. And if you don't, you can look under the more option and there should be an interpretation option. Can anybody check that, make sure that that's the case? I don't see mine. Anybody want to see if they do have the interpretation? Great. And also during the conversation portion, we will have mics muted, cameras on, and chats muted. Save up what questions you have for the Q&A section. We've left ample time for Q&A, hopefully 20 to 30 minutes. And the Q&A portion, you can either raise your hand and we'll unmute your mic, or you can put your question in the chat at that time. So I'm so excited to be here with you today, and it's a difficult moment. It continues to be a difficult moment, and we still continue to do the work. Um, I would like to start by introducing Gabrielle Apollon, who directs the Haitian Immigration Rights Project at New York University Schools of Law's Global Justice Clinic. She is also the coordinator of the Hemispheric Network for Haitian Migrants' Rights, a coalition of Haitian rights migrant leaders in 13 countries collaborating to combat the anti-Black racism, exclusion, and cyclical displacement Haitians have faced as they've migrated throughout the Western Hemisphere. Prior to her current role, Gabrielle served as the managing attorney at The Door, a Center for Alternatives. There, she headed the Legal Services Center's affirmative immigration practice and represented young people in immigration and family law matters. She graduated from NYU School of Law. Gabrielle also holds a bachelor's in art and a master's in international affairs from Columbia University. Welcome, Gabrielle. And we have with us Dr. Gabeau. She is the founder and chief executive officer of Immigrant Family Services Institute, USA, where she empowers staff to advance planning and employ initiatives benefiting immigrant communities. Dr. Gabeau has a deep understanding of immigration issues, a commitment to social justice, and the ability to cultivate partnerships, secure funding, which is super important, and authentically advocate for immigrant rights. Her steadfast advocacy also spans public health, where she has worked on many initiatives addressing women and children's health, both in the United States and in Haiti. She earned her doctoral degree in strategic foresight from Regent University and graduate degrees in public health from Boston University and management from Cambridge College. And then we have with us Jesse Hofnug Garsoff, who is a professor of history and director of the Immigrant Justice Lab at Harvard University. The Immigrant Justice Lab coordinates academic research and other forms of scholarship in collaboration with organizations that defend the legal rights of immigrants in the United States. His books include A Tale of Two Cities, Santo Domingo and New York After 1950, published in 2008, and Racial Migrants, New York and the Revolutionary Politics of the Spanish Caribbean in 2019. He received his PhD in history from Princeton University and is the recipient of numerous awards and accolades, centering history and immigrant and ethnic history and immigration. I messed up that last part, but welcome to all of you. What's going to unfold today is a conversation. It is a conversation that we open up at the end. We have questions that each of our panelists will address from their perspective. And like a conversation, the hope is that we build off of one another and to give a kind of comprehensive perspective of the questions I will pose. Again, if questions rise up for you, please write them down and hold them to the Q&A portion. Let's begin. So as I said, I'm calling in from Mexico City, and I'm working on my second project, which is on Haitian migrants in Mexico. And this work started in Tapachula in 2022. The reason why it shifted to Mexico City is that folks have found themselves here in Mexico City seeking residence because their kind of journey right to the border, as they imagined it, has been forestalled. And so those of us who work in immigration, it is dynamic and always changing and shifting and volatile, but it is extremely so the case now. And so I approach these topics and these questions with not only my research in mind, but a sincere, and I think this is the case for those joining us, a sincere desire to understand and to better navigate, right? What just seems to me, at least, as um, an impossibly difficult terrain that folks are navigating nonetheless. So, with that, I would like to ask the first question, which I'm going to have Gabrielle jump us off. And the question is, can you please provide a brief overview of the situation for Haitian immigrants of various statuses here in the United States? As follow-up to this question, then, how would you compare the situation to that of Haitian immigrants elsewhere, for instance, in the Dominican Republic or Mexico?
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Darlene, and thank you to HSA for inviting us to discuss, I think, this incredibly important issue, as you mentioned. So again, my name is Gabrielle Apollon. I direct the Haitian Immigrant Rights Project at the Global Justice Clinic. But I think the second component and the work that I do out of the clinic, I think is the where I'm basing kind of some of my knowledge from about this question, which is coordinating the hemispheric network that Darlene mentioned. So we do have network members both in the US, and very lucky to have Dr. Gabeau as one of them with us here. But we have members in Mexico, in the DR, in a number of other countries. And so I think, I think it is a challenge to describe, as you mentioned, because this situation is so volatile, so ever changing. It's a challenge to, discuss all of the components of it. So I think each of us will probably try to grab a few. I'm not an immigration lawyer anymore, but since I was, and I kind of sit at the intersection of human rights and migration, I will touch on some of the legal changes and the impacts that has had on people both in the U.S. And also try to provide this compare and contrast with some of the other places you mentioned. I think it comes to it comes as no surprise to most people here. If I describe like the incredible challenging context, right, and situation for immigrants in general in the U.S., but also given the anti-Blackness of this administration, the xenophobia, and this particular, I would say, arguably obsession with Haitian immigrants. That Haitian immigrants are really oftentimes at the crosshairs and kind of at the bullseye of so many of these attacks on immigrants in this country. I think some of the things I can mention is we are seeing the biggest delegalization campaign there's ever been when it comes to immigrants that did have forms of status, whether it was parole, whether it was temporary protected status, and this administration seeking to rip away all of that. Between eliminating the CHNV program, or as we call it, the Program Biden sometimes, that provided protections and parole for over 200,000 Haitians, not to mention the other nationalities. And if you look at the over 350,000 Haitians that have temporary protected status that this administration is also trying to revoke, that is a lot of people. And, there are serious implications for, access to justice, access to immigration representation, access to protections, access to work, right? Employment authorization that really impacts I would say, our whole community. And that's not to mention, right, this attack on birthright citizenship, the extreme vetting that they have put in place for naturalization applicants and citizenship applicants. And the reason I mentioned that gamut, and I think it's important, is because, sometimes, and I don't think this is only the Haitian community, but sometimes historically, I think people have separated themselves or categorized themselves as like, oh no, but I'm safe, or oh no, but I'm not the boat people, or I'm not the people in Program Biden or whatnot. And I think what we have to acknowledge and come to terms with is that this administration seeks to attack all immigrants, and especially all Black immigrants. And that, is not just for the precarious and quote unquote temporary statuses, like temporary protected status, but they are seeking to strip people away from their citizenship. And I say that, I don't think, I don't think it's not an attempt. Yes, I will slow down. I apologize. I know we have interpretation, so thank you for the reminder. It's not an attempt to, stoke additional fear. But it is, I think, important to remember that we are all needed in this fight. And you will hear me say this over and over again, but we need the allies. We need those who have been here 20 to 40 years. We need those who have been there 2 to 3 years. Everyone needs to be in this fight to defend our communities. And I'll go on to the second part of your question, maybe just to attempt to protect time. But I think that there are ripple effects on this administration's attacks on immigration and migration policy that we continue to see in other countries, whether it's the externalization of the U.S. border, the attempts, as Darlène mentioned, Tapachula in Mexico. The U.S. administration has been hell-bent in trying to pressure Mexico to keep immigrants as far away from the US-Mexico border as possible. And unfortunately, that's not just this administration, but you have seen an increased pressure, and Haitians have really borne the brunt of that. And at some points, there've been descriptions of Tapachula as this quote unquote like open air prison because people can't get out. And that there have been recent shifts, but that's one thing. But two, I think it's important to note that for places like the Dominican Republic, unfortunately, some of the things that we have been seeing and have been shocked at, shocked by here in the US, whether it's, the stripping of due process in all real immigration detention or in immigration raids, the Dominican Republic has been doing this for quite some time when it comes to Haitians. We have a member of our network who's based in the DR, we have network meetings every month where our members come and share what's happening in the various countries to people of Haitian descent. And after hearing recently what had been happening in the US, in places like Minneapolis and Chicago, the member in the DR was like, we knew we knew that due process wasn't being respected here at all, but we thought that you all had due process in the US, and seeing the similarities of what has been happening. Just to give a few examples, so this past year in 2025, the Dominican Republic deported over 350,000 Haitians in 1 year. That is the same number of approximately the same number of all Haitians in the US with TPS, but that was in 1 year. If you made a comparison per capita of like the US population and the Dominican population and the number of deportations, the US would have to deport 8 million people per year to provide a comparison to what is happening in the Dominican Republic. And as I mentioned, I was talking about ripple effects. Previously, even though these situations have been going on for quite some time in the DR, the US was one of the few countries that was kind of interrogating and questioning some of the things the Dominican Republic had been doing, like revoking, birthright citizenship for over 200,000 people. As we see here, this administration is not only not questioning any of those, it is in fact trying to implement some of the same policies that other countries have been doing, like the DR. And then lastly, the target and the other component that I think this is why I think the comparative analysis is really important, is because unfortunately, I think if you look at the DR, you can see where if things continue here in the US in this way, these things could be happening. So for instance, over the last year, the Dominican administration, the Dominican president, Abinader, instituted policies to, in fact, place immigration agents in each of the public hospitals in the country for the specific purpose, in fact, to target, detain, and deport people seeking medical care. And one of the main populations that they have been targeting are pregnant women and babies. And they're ripping people out of their hospital gowns and their hospital rooms and deporting them mere days after C-sections, mere days after labor. And I underscore that because, you do see there are more pregnant women in the US detention centers now than ever before. And the gravity, and I'll post, the recent New York Times article about it in the chat, but the gravity of what is happening in the DR, I think oftentimes is not adequately recognized. You can give me a time check, Darlene, but I want to touch on maybe Mexico a little bit as well, because I think it's important to recognize there are some places that are, in fact, recognizing the realities of what's happening in Haiti, and shifting their migration policies somewhat to adequately recognize that. I say that with lots of caveats, which I'll get to, but Mexico recently recognized that Haitians, in fact, should be recognized as refugees due to the generalized violence and due to the massive violations of human rights that are occurring in Haiti. And it is one of the few countries in the region that has done that. And so I think that deserves to be acknowledged. And there are severe implementation challenges. So there are practically no Haitian Creole interpreters in the country. So although it's like on paper that people should be able to access these different applications, these different statuses, the reality is you can't get an interpreter to have your asylum interview. And for so many, the delays are extreme. And so people are struggling, as I think Darlene and many can attest, in Mexico, even though there are some improvements on paper in terms of policies. I'll pause there because I
Yeah,
have a few
sorry.
minutes
Thank
gone
you
long.
so
Go
much.
ahead.
No, it's actually okay. And it might be that you addressed some of the points that the other panelists were going to address. But I would like to offer Dr. Hafna Garstoff if you wanted to add something to this, and then Dr. Gabeau.
I'm happy to turn the microphone directly to Dr. Gabeau. I have some things to say, I think more things to say for the other questions.
I appreciate that. Dr. Gabeau?
I mean, I think Gabrielle did a wonderful job thinking about what's happening outside of the U.S. But what I would probably add for Haitians living here in the U.S. in terms of what we've been observing all across is that ripple of effect of immigration policies creating fear at so many different levels, because so often when we talk about fear, we are simply thinking about people who are afraid of going to out so that they are not met by us. But when we're looking at fear in general for our community, it's much more than that. So we have the first layer, which is the losing protection, right? Everyone is afraid because it's almost like one day you were legal, you were protected, and the next day you are not. We also have the fear of family separation. Again, so often we are meeting with parents, and then children are the one coming to us asking whether or not we can help them if parents are being deported. So that's a very, very specific fear that we really need to pay a lot of attention to. There is also fear of deportation because, again, those who have been detained, they are praying every day so that they are not being deported. And the reason why, because, again, we know returning to a country that they left because of danger, because of all of the gang violence and so on and so forth. So the fear of being deported to the same place is very, very real. There is also the fear of losing work authorization. This is something that we are dealing with every day, where people who had a very good job, for example, the drivers, CDL drivers, they had a very high paying job, like sometimes $45 an hour. And all of a sudden, they cannot renew their CDL driver's license, meaning that now they are out of work. And when you lose your work authorization, what does it mean? It means that you are not able to work, you are not able to pay for rent, you are not able to support your family, you're not even able to really get to a market to do your shopping, especially right now with the high cost of living. So when you have the fear of when first either that you lose your work authorization or you are living with that fear, so you can understand exactly all the implications. Meaning, fear of even planning for the future. For example, if we have a lot of students who used to come to our program, and it's almost like they are negotiating with themselves. What is the point of me coming to class to learn English or to do XYZ if I'm going to be deported? What is the point of even saving money to do something like to rent a house or to do whatever that I needed to do because I don't know whether or not I'm going to be around tomorrow? And the last one that I'm going to say is the emotional toll that this is having on everyone. So I work mainly with the entire state, whether or not it's with policymakers, the governors, the city, just elected officials, just name it. And one thing that I'm telling everyone to keep in mind is that over the next year or so, we're going to see a high level of mental illness that we have never seen within the immigrant community, because all of those things, they have a huge toll on people's mental health. So again, when we are thinking about the general kind of picture, we need to see all the layers of implication that US policies have on our community. And again, Gabrielle did a wonderful job talking about, the impact in Dominican Republic. 2 weeks ago, I was there and I was listening to the families and listening to the fear for them. So we went to meet with different groups, and we just learned that one group could not come to this place because they don't have the authorization to travel from one neighborhood to the next. So just to tell you how challenging and difficult it is for Haitians all across, the world. So again, it's a very difficult situation and something that we really need to pay a lot of attention to. Thank you.
I thank you so much for underscoring the social, emotional, psychological toll this is taking on those who, come from many different immigration statuses. And those, as you mentioned, Gabrielle, who themselves might be citizens, but are in mixed status families, which might be the case for a number of us in this room. That's important to continue to remember. I want to get more into policy, and I want to caveat is we do live in the age of misinformation. And I think a lot about the various conversations I have with my mother and my family members who have TPS or various statuses, and just the ways in which the fear that circulates through misinformation, because there are these big cases that are still yet to be decided, right? And the ones that I want to highlight for us in this conversation, and I know Gabrielle will add, and I know Jesse will add, but I want to highlight four. And when Dr. Gabeau, when you begin to answer, if you can just remind people of who you are and where you're calling from, and then maybe some of us don't know about these cases, so if you can just give us a sense of what they are. One is a Supreme Court TPS case that has been argued and is being decided. The other is actually, I find it unexpected. I'm curious about this one. It is a bipartisan Congressional TPS advocacy. Then Gabrielle mentioned this, and I would like to hear more from you about an update. Again, these cases are being decided. This is the birthright citizenship case. The last one is an update, and perhaps Gabrielle will help us with that. And this is the adjudication ban. And I know these are legal terms that for us might be a little opaque or confusing, but there are these, folks are circulating information about, like, one day, oh, like, you're no longer a citizen, even if you were born here. And I said to my mother, I'm like, wait, hold on, who told you that? And she goes, well, everyone knows this. And this happens a lot with the folks I work with in the United States or even in Mexico. So I would like for us to kind of get a sense really of the legislation. What is the legislation? Where is it in the point of decision? And what would it mean depending on how it's decided? Thank you so much, Dr. Gabeau.
Thank you, Darlene. And again, Dr. Gabeau, I'm in Boston, Massachusetts. So this is where our headquarter organization is located. But we work with people all around the world, because again, we work with people in Haiti, Chile, Brazil, and even all the way in Russia. So our which is really, really wide. So misinformation, darling, is one of the biggest priority that we have to every single day fight against, because we are dealing with a very difficult situation already, where so many policies are directly affecting families. At the same time, you have people, I don't know whether or not they are well intentioned or what, or maybe they think that they are the expert. They are the ones spreading, misinformation around. And that's the reason why so often people are hiding in their home. They don't want to get out because of the misinformation. And unfortunately, social media does not help, because everyone is connected to social media. And that's the reason why we have to be on social media every single day to make sure that we counteract the misinformation that is going on all around. So around the Supreme Court, in fact, we were all on our tippy toes today, although that we know that we expect a decision to come out of the Supreme Court by the end of the month, early July. But some of the experts who are working closely, around the different Supreme Court dockets, they were like, oh, maybe something could come out today. So the whole morning we've been waiting for that decision to come out. So just so you know, on Tuesday this week, our lawyers who kind of made the argument with the Supreme Court around the idea of not, terminating TPS for Haiti based on the lack of due process, not following any of the protocol that they were supposed to, that the government was supposed to follow before making the decision. So the whole Supreme Court case is about not following protocol, because again, the government is telling us, yes, that they've done everything that they needed to do to come with the decision to terminate TPS, but throughout the whole process, not even an email. It was almost word of mouth. Oh, do you want to terminate TPS? Let's do it. But there was no connection with the State Department. There is no connection with with Haiti. All of the preliminary work that they were supposed to do to get a clear sense of the country condition to make a determination whether or not to terminate TPS, none of them was done. So that's the reason why we went to the Supreme Court to say, the protocol was not followed, so they should not make a determination based on whatever the government said. So on Tuesday, our lawyers went back again because there is new evidence of other information that came out to show that they did not even try to ask for a description of the condition of the country. They did not even email anyone. So a lot of new information is coming out. Because of that, our lawyers thought it was in the best interest of the case to ask for the Supreme Court to completely toss out the case, meaning that that case should not even come out to you, because you did not have time to compile all the evidence needed to make a determination. So again, there is some information out there and there is more to come. And as you know, they expedited this case to the Supreme Court. So, they did so fast that even the members of the Supreme Court did not have all the information. Some of the questions that they were asking were questions that they should have been, apprised before they come to us. So our lawyers asked on Tuesday to toss the case completely based on the new evidence that is coming that shows that they did not follow the proper protocol. So now the question is whether or not this is going to have an impact on whatever decision that the Supreme Court is going to show. We have yet to see. So now we have this balance in terms of, some people think, based on the argument that we had last month, that we might find a favorable, outcome from the Supreme Court. Others are more skeptical. They said there is no way that, Judge Roberts is going to really move on the other side to give us a relief. So at the same time, what we are doing right now through Senator Markey, who is also in our state. So remember, we had the discharge petition that was led by Congresswoman Ayanna Presley in Massachusetts. So we were very successful with the discharge petition. Now we want to move to the Senate so that we can also introduce a bill that will allow, if approved, that we have a law that will allow people to stay here for 3 years. It's a very challenging, route, because again, finding 13 Republican senators to co-sponsor or to give their support for this is difficult. However, we believe that if we don't try, we don't get anywhere. So we have to try. So this week we are waiting for a bill number from Senator Markey, which will allow all of us, wherever we are, to reach out to the Republican senators. We already have a list of possible allies from the Republican senators that we're going to reach out to make sure that we can get their support. So again, we are working on different fronts as a way to, in case if something doesn't work out, that at least we have something else. But again, there is a lot of information also that is that we cannot share publicly, that our advocates are working on as a way to see how we can protect TPS. But again, this month is the month for us to hear what the Supreme Court has decided and then which direction we're going to take. So I'll pause here so that others can go to the other two levels of question that you have, Darlene.
Thank you. Before we get to you, Gabby, I wonder, and I'm thinking now here, Dr. Hofna-Garsoff, I'm thinking that now with your research and really thinking about this question of birthright citizenship. I would like to maybe invite you to talk about that before we go to the ban, the adjudication ban, if we can get some more clarity around this question of birthright citizenship, particularly as it has been practiced in the United States and what is now being proposed.
Sure. So I'm Jesse Hoffman-Garskoff, and I'm in Massachusetts. I'm in Cambridge, Massachusetts. So the question of birthright citizenship is something that was implicit in the U.S. Constitution prior to the Civil War, but didn't apply to Afro-descendant people because of local practice, but then eventually because of Supreme Court decisions. And after the Civil War, the members of Congress and the political, and actually many members of the voting public in the United States favored changing the law to explicitly make clear that people who had formerly been enslaved were citizens of the United States, and anyone born in the United States was going to be a citizen of the United States, with one exception. The exception were people who were not subject to the jurisdiction of the United States, and that at the time referred very clearly to Native Americans who at the time did not enjoy citizenship. Later in the 20th century, the law was changed again, and Native Americans have dual citizenship between their sovereign nations and the United States. And since then, the common understanding has been that everyone born in the United States is a U.S. citizen. It has been tested. It was tested at the very end of the 19th century in the case of Chinese children born to Chinese parents. And the Supreme Court, this was a Supreme Court that was extremely racist and extremely antithetical to Chinese migration to the United States, and yet determined that people born in the United States under the 14th Amendment to the Constitution were U.S. citizens. With respect to Gabrielle's earlier comment, it has been the case that the people who have been theorizing undermining birthright citizenship in the United States, and the ones who have been theorizing undermining birthright citizenship and then succeeded in doing so in the Dominican Republic, have been relying on basically the same very flawed logic, which is these parenthetical phrases that say, and subject to the jurisdiction thereof, something slightly different in the Dominican Constitution. And when the sentencia came down in the Dominican Republic that to support this, there were many in the United States who were proposing this, and it seemed both frightening, but also like a really distant possibility that there would be a political will to push this forward in the United States. And then here we are, as in so many of these unthinkable situations, we're now in the unthinkable situation where we're actually having the 9 justices of the Supreme Court consider whether or not a presidential dictate that the way that we've all understood this law has been wrong for the last 150 years, right? That the way that the people who wrote the law very clearly intended it to be at the time should be overthrown, and we should understand that the clause subject to the jurisdiction thereof meant, even though it did not mean this at the time to the people who were writing it, that what it meant and what it means is that anyone who is here without authorization or is out of status, their children don't benefit from birthright citizenship. And that's the argument that's going to be made. I am hopeful that the Supreme Court is not going to go that far. I can't tell you that I'm convinced that all of the Supreme Court justices will vote against this. I'm not particularly hopeful that not one or two of them will, but I this is not the case that I'm the most worried about in this context. But of course, I'm very worried that if it did happen, the unthinkable did happen, it would be devastating and dreadful. And the example of the Dominican Republic is a really good one, because in the Dominican Republic, the creation of this interpretation of the Constitution then denaturalized many people who actually already were citizens, and created a kind of a nightmare scenario. I'll stop there.
Thank you so much for that clarification. And I think, Gabby, you wanted to add more clarification to the question of the Supreme Court decision in TPS before we move to the adjudication ban.
Yeah, for that and the Senate. And Dr. Gabeau, this just came out, but I wanted to share with everyone that we finally, just as of a few hours ago, we do have a Senate bill number. And I want to share it with everyone because we have some action steps around that we will also share. So it's Senate Bill number 4814. And I also want to highlight something, I think we have been talking about some pretty some pretty despairing, some pretty difficult, and some very real challenges. But I want to say the other commonality that I have found kind of across like all of the organizations that we work with and are privileged to partner with here in the US, but actually throughout the region, throughout the entire hemisphere, is that in every single place there are so many Haitians and Haitian leaders who are fighting tooth and nail for our community. And that is truly the only reason we still have TPS to this day, right? It is because of this litigation. It is because of this discharge petition that everybody who thought they knew stuff about immigration policy and the policy and DC said there was no way it was going to happen. And these people, the Dr. Gabeaus, the Haitian Bridge Alliance, the Geraldes, these people made it happen. And it is the first, I think it's the first immigration related discharge petition ever. And so that is huge. And there are other communities who are looking and are like, oh, maybe we have a chance, maybe we have a shot to do this as a result of this. And I think it's important to underscore that it's our history, right? It is the history of Haitians in Haiti, and it is the history of Haitians, the recent and current realities of what Haitians are doing now. We are not sitting back and seeing what is happening to us. We are fighting, we are resisting. And so I think that's important to keep in mind. And those are some of the reasons why I want to highlight, this TPS Senate advocacy. As Dr. Gabeau mentioned, it is an uphill battle, right? It is a lot of senators, but there are a lot of people and what happened, it really was a grassroots mobilization effort to get the discharge petition through the House. And that is what we need right now. We need that for the Senate, but we'll give more details later. But I think it's nationwide. We need so many senators. So every single one of you in every state that you are in, if you're in the US, has a role to play. And then for the SCOTUS decision, I think the only thing I want to highlight is, this motion that they filed earlier this week. It's called a dig motion, dismiss as improvidently granted. As Dr. Gabeau mentioned, they're saying, because we are seeing new facts that come out, this case is not ready, that we do not have the full factual record to have a decision, to have the Supreme Court make this decision on this. And so they're requesting that the Supreme Court send it back down to the federal appellate court, who made the underlying decision, Judge Reyes, to make in order to have time to really pull out the full factual record of what's happening. And then one thing that I think is quite important to know, and this is something that has come out through this discovery period, who notoriously takes a really long time, but that the immigration agency responsible for determining this, USCIS, their recommendation, well, it's DHS, but USCIS, 48 hours prior to the final determination, their recommendation was to extend TPS. It was after, when political appointees got involved, when people decided that they wanted to, make decisions that make a certain someone in a certain house happy, that they shifted those. But we say that because, or I think it's important to note that because the truth and the reality, that is not the land in which these people are making decisions, right? They are making really pointed decisions against the current context and the reality that almost everybody can see in Haiti. I think there was one more thing I was going to say. We'll talk more about what you can do on TPS Senate front, but the last update I wanted to give on adjudication ban. So, that is one of the things due to the travel ban for Haiti and many other countries. They suspended immigrant visa processing. So many people can't actually get to the U.S. From Haiti, which we're seeing in the World Cup and all of those realities with so many countries. But there was a recent case, Dorcas International Institute of Rhode Island versus USCIS. The other attempt at a ban that they did, they tried to halt all adjudication of all applications from Haitians and many other countries. And they tried to halt all asylum adjudication. And a federal court, I think it was last week, I believe, issued a decision that said that was unlawful. We're sure it will be appealed, but I think it's important to recognize this. There is so much fighting back and there's so much resistance that's happening. And sometimes it can be completely demoralizing because things are changing on a daily basis. And yet, thankfully, we have people like the Dr. Gabeaus, like so many of these organizations, Haitian Women for Haitian Refugees, and the litigators, the impact litigators who are really pushing back against these clearly unlawful policies, not least of to mention is the birthright citizenship, which the Supreme Court heard oral arguments in April. I'll pause there.
Thank you so much, Gabrielle. You gave us I'm really enjoying the way that these conversations are building off of each other. And the way that you kind of leave a little bit of what do you call it, space for me to do the transition. And that was, what can you do? What can we do? And I'm going to turn this question, I'm going to pose it fully and turn the question then to Jesse, who will start us off. What can we do to support Haitian immigrant rights, immigration rights? And I'm going to pause at this question of immigration rights. Now is not the space to kind of think about what that means and how loaded that is, or that in this context, immigration and rights don't sit comfortably together. So thinking about that as a reality. So what can we do to support Haitian immigration rights, as well as Haitian immigrant communities, including our own family members or ourselves, navigating this volatile and ever-shifting U.S. immigration landscape? So we did get that number, and that bill number is 4814. What do we do with that? Thank you, Jesse.
Thank you. So we will get into, and this will come from my colleagues on the panel, more specific things about the specific cases that have been mentioned, and particularly working on the TPS question. I wanted to just take a step back for a second, because I think the way that you pose the question is really helpful, because I think there's a set of things that have to do specifically with the Haitian community, and there's a set of things that have to do with immigrants all together. And we haven't talked about dozens of other cases and dozens of other injustices and lawlessness that's beyond the pale that affects Haitians and many other communities. And I think it's useful to think, when we think about the present moment, to think about, I mean, obviously we have to think very carefully about the folks who are losing their parole or potentially losing parole, potentially losing TPS. But even before that threat, I was looking at the numbers, and basically over the last 25 years, something like 3,000 to 5,000 deportation cases a year taken against Haitian nationals in the United States, right? So that's a fairly low number given the number of people in the United States. Low number, I'm saying, compared to the way that the immigration system works in the United States. And then starting in 2022, that number shoots up. 2022, not 2024, 2022, it shoots up. And you see over the last 5 years that more than 180,000 people have had deportation hearings scheduled for Haitians newly deported scheduled. So it means they receive a notice to appear and they have to go to immigration court. And the reason for going for immigration court is that the government is seeking to deport you. And most of those people the government is seeking to deport them, but simply because they don't have status or because their status is in question. A very small number of them are people who have become ineligible for their status because of some kind of criminal conviction. Not to say that those people don't also deserve rights, but I'm just saying that it's still a very small number. And of those, almost 200,000 people who have now, in the last 5 years, or before without TPS having been canceled, are now facing deportation hearings. 170,000 of them are still pending, right? They've successfully deported 14,000 Haitians in the last 5 years. But 170,000 people are still waiting for their immigration cases. So independent of all the other things that we're talking about, that group of people is facing the situation that all immigrants are facing right now, right? That is to say, those immigration courts are no longer, to the extent that they ever had any independence or rule of law, they are not functioning that way now. People are being now subject to detention when in an unlawful way when they are not people who need to be detained. And of the it's actually 170,000 of the recently targeted people, but almost 190,000 Haitians waiting for their immigration cases. About 40,000 of them have pending asylum cases. And those cases are now also subject to all of the the violations of international and US law that the US government is doing to try and avoid allowing people to have the fair hearing of their asylum cases. It's another example of Haitians being the ones who made the history, right? When asylum was first created through the Refugee Act in 1980, the government decided that it was going to not let Haitians as a group apply for asylum. And the Supreme Court cases that Haitians won are the ones that guaranteed every asylum seeker a hearing, which is now a principle that is being undermined by this government. So when we ask the question, what can we do? My mind goes to what are we going to do about those 40,000 asylum cases? And I should say it's actually three kinds of application that we call asylum. It's asylum, withholding of removal, or deferral under the Convention Against Torture. All of that is one kind of body of humanitarian defense. And the thing that I think the Haitian Studies Association, I know you all are already doing this. I know Darlène is doing this. Many of us are doing this. The first thing that we can do is that those of us who have expertise about what's going on in Haiti, we can become experts to help testify in favor of people who are applying for asylum. Because to succeed in an asylum case, you don't just have to tell a good story. You have to actually show evidence that the thing that you say is going to happen to you is likely to happen to you, or that your fear is well founded. But if you do the math, there are 50 people on this call, and there are 40,000 pending asylum cases, not to mention all the ones that will be filed if people lose TPS. So that if everybody's ready to take on 700 cases, then that would be a good solution. But I think that we have to think beyond that and start thinking about how we can be producing scholarship that can be published and brought into the system so that advocates, people who don't have only 1 out of every 4 of the Haitians who are facing deportation hearings even have a lawyer. So they're not likely to have an expert. So we need to think about how we can get the things that we know into forms of publication without necessarily loading them up with all of our disciplinary concerns, our view of late capitalism, or any of the other things that we really care about and need to write about. We need to figure out how to publish this material and get it into the public so that we can inform these decisions in a way that's really important. I'll stop there because I want to leave space to colleagues, but I'm happy to talk more about ways of doing that. And I will also we'll share if you're interested in being trained as an expert, our friends at the Center for Gender and Refugee Studies are running these expertise trainings, and they're really good at referring, and they can help you to create a general declaration so you can testify in cases of people that you don't even need, and your testimony can go a long way.
Excellent. Thank you so much. And thank you for that added context, right? We're talking about folks, not only folks of various statuses. This is important, right? Oftentimes when we say immigrant, especially in this context, it's read always already. And this is something I'm kind of saying and hyperbolically, but I do think as undocumented, without even thinking what that means. or the various processes or various forms of documentation, right? And also that the people are at different phases of deportation, that deportation does happen in different phases, and that the people are also in different phases of seeking asylum. And I think that context is very important for us to hold as we think about the various ways in which we can do something, right? And I think one of the things I would just say here that is important, and we've all talked about this, is be resourced with the proper information. This is important, right? And so, Dr. Gabeau, I'll have you add, and then we'll kind of turn to the kind of nuts and bolts of what do we do immediately in response to bill number 4814 before we open it up for Q&A.
Thank you. And so when we're thinking about the bill number that we've been waiting for, and I'm so glad that we have the number now. So what we have been doing is to kind of do a general analysis of the political landscape to know exactly who do we connect with and what is the likelihood of some of them, responding favorably to us. So, for example, we have a list of all of the senators, especially those who are in Florida, Ohio, Maine, North Carolina. And when we look at the names, the first factor that we consider is their electoral vulnerability. So we want to know whether or not they have a high kind of level of vulnerability for the election. Are they going to go for election? Do they worry about losing their seat? Or are they okay? They don't have to worry about losing their seat, especially if they have no re-election coming up. Because again, as you can imagine, especially for the Republican, they are very, very, very cautious of, whatever position that they take and whatever the guy at the White House will do if they go against. So that's the reason why we're thinking about, what is their level of vulnerability around election, so to know exactly who to connect with and what to do. So from there, we do an analysis and then we look also at the population size. How many Haitians do they have? For example, when we're thinking about Florida, Florida is one of the states that we're going to really put a lot of emphasis because, again, when we're thinking about the number of TPS holders that we have in Florida, close to 160,000. So that's a big number. And their impact on the healthcare sector, on the vulnerable population, especially the aging population, all of those things, those are the analysis that we do as a way for us to call people and say, you know what, we need you to go as much as you can to the office of Senator, for example, Moody Ashley, because again, she's in Florida, and there is, a lot of kind of, she has a lot of interest in supporting something like TPS because of, the state that she is. So what people will be doing, again, we will be sharing, the list with people and then telling you from 1 to 5, what are the numbers that you need to focus more compared to those that you can just send an email or just make a phone call, but do not kill yourself because, again, the likelihood of them saying yes to you is so low. But those that we are pretty sure that it's very high, we're going to ask you to go and knock at their door, especially they're going to be in recess soon. So as soon as they are in recess, we want people to understand that this is the time for you to go because during the recess time, they have to meet with constituents. So again, understanding who to call, getting the phone numbers, email address, whatever that we do all around the US to make sure that they hear from us. So that's how we were able to be successful with the discharge petition. So, and then we are just waiting for the decision for the Supreme Court. We will be in DC. We'll be marching depending on what exactly the outcome is. So we ask people to really stay connected to all of us here so that whenever the information is out, that you know and that you show up. Because one of the biggest things that they count on during this fight is for us to remain silent, is for us to remain isolated so we don't have to have an impact. But the minute that we start to gather to show up. And as you said, Jesse, for the stories to be in the front page of the news. So whenever we do those things, guess what? We get their attention. And that's the reason why I said at this moment specific, we cannot be silent. We cannot remain, undecided. We have to show up. We have to meet with people. We have to share information. We have to make those phone calls. We have to be actively engaged in the fight because it's about the life of so many thousands of our brothers and sisters. So again, we will be sharing a lot of information because again, the bill number just came out today. So we will be sharing a lot of information with you.
Thank you. I should say, we're going to gather this in a very prompt manner. And that is what I am doing today. I'm going to email you all right now. We're going to get this out to the membership as soon as possible. So thank you for that. I think we should open it up. Unless does anyone on the panel have one more thing that like Gabby, please go ahead.
I apologize.
I call you Gabby, and I don't even know if that's okay. Is that okay?
I do love Gabrielle, but that's all right.
Gabrielle, I'm sorry.
That's okay. So thank you. And thank you, Dr. Gabeau, for everything you shared. And again, I do want to underscore like these organizations have done so much incredible work and they are often small and they're small but mighty and they need all of us behind us in terms of funding, like financial donations, like and I'll list a few, and maybe Darlene, this will add it to the like share back or the information you'll share after. But these organizations were strapped prior to these onslaughts, right? So I think that's important to remember. But also, as Dr. Gabeau mentioned, so they're doing a lot of phone banking, and they will be doing this starting in earnest now that we have a Senate bill. And so one of the organizations that has been doing like organizing some grassroots phone banking is the Institute for Justice and Democracy in Haiti in partnership with Dr. Gabeau and so many others. And so I do want to put the email, if you want to get involved, like get on the list to get their information about the phone banking. I put the email in the chat. Again, Senate Bill 4814, but the beautiful thing is they will send you a little, blurb of like what to say. Sometimes if people aren't comfortable with these kinds of calls, it's really helpful to have, this is your little script, like it matters. And so I think that's, we want to encourage each of you, even if this is the first time you've done it, like you need it, we need you in the fight. And then secondly, to Dr. Gabeau's point, and actually Jesse's point as well, this question of like, what can academics do? We think that there are, and we hope to share out, some calls for research in the coming months of like, these things would be particularly useful as it pertains to Haitians and Haitian cases. But also like op-eds, like getting this information, the messaging, getting this information right in this. The reality is like the reason there's a SCOTUS case, the reason that there's advocacy in Congress, the reason that there's like these narrative battles as well, we have to fight on all fronts, right? Because we are getting attacked on all fronts. And the reality is we kind of need this like full frontal position in order to push the needle wherever we can. And so all of these strategies are critical, but we do need more people. So I will pause there.